Hi there, and welcome. Today we're diving into one of the most pressing questions facing leaders in every organisation, sector, and agency. How do you make smart, strategic investments in artificial intelligence? To help us unpack this, we're joined by CSIRO's Professor Eleanor Huntington, Executive Director of Digital, National Facilities and Collections, and Dr. Stefan Hajkovic, a Senior Principal Scientist and Strategist and author of CSIRO's newly released AI Investment Guide. This guide is designed to help leaders and decision makers navigate the complex landscape of AI investment and choose the right project to invest in. It offers practical tools and frameworks, from ROI and benefit cost analysis to multi-criteria decision making, to help ensure that AI projects deliver real value. Whether you're a consultant, a corporate executive, an AI program lead, or just curious about how to make better tech decisions, this conversation is packed with insight. Let's tune in.
I'm Eleanor Huntington, and who are you, Steph?
I'm Stefan Hajkovic. Yeah, I work in CSIRO in strategy, foresight, and policy. I sort of work at the interface of all the science and technology we do, and then its uptake, adoption in government and industry on questions of strategy, on foresight, on what's coming, and how really to make most use of all this technology. So I've been at Xyro for 25 years. The first 10 years or so I did it, and my PhD was on decision theory and how people make decisions rationally, analytically, looking at the multi-criteria decision analysis technique, and then how they do it intuition and gut feel, and both were interesting. But for the first 15 years or so in CSIRO, I was looking at natural resource and environment problems and being asked the question, how do we get best bang for the buck in terms of fixing up Australia's degraded environments where we have saline soils or water pollution or biodiversity loss? How do we work out where to spend and get best bang for the buck? And it really got, and then I did an economics degree while I was doing this as well. Wow. So I wanted to try and figure out how you go about things like benefit cost analysis, but then it has its limitations around monetization. And I'm fascinated by the question about how we make wise decisions on resource allocation and prioritization. So yeah, I was really happy to pick this one up, and I'm sorry for the dry title, but that's about it. Ex ante simply means before the investment occurs. But what strikes me about AI and ICT investments is the incredibly high failure rates that exist, and the enormous amount of investment that's going on. Globally, billions and billions. I think we've got the statistic in the report here somewhere, but we're in the space of hundreds of billions going into these models. 5 years or so, the world will be spending over trillions of dollars. And a lot of the companies, I was a roundtable with the finance sector just recently of C-suite executives from the finance sector, and the question put was, what are they grappling with? And they were all grappling with the question of how do they choose their use cases? We know the board has told us we've got to do AI. How do we choose our use cases? So that's what we're trying to respond to is how you make those decisions wisely, given the risks around this investment. How do you choose the right AI projects, use cases, models, and investments to make?
Yeah, interesting. And so based on that, who else are you hoping will find this interesting in spite of the title, and why?
Yeah, in spite of so I think government, local, state and federal is looking at a multitude of AI projects. They're building AI agents, they're building AI models to speed things up and deliver services faster and better. But at some levels, they're even, I think, starting to look at building larger, bigger, what we'd call foundational models with general purpose application down the track. So they'll be challenged with this question too about how to get really good return on investment and where do we invest and prioritize. In the private sector, I think we're getting a lot of interest from boards and executive teams that have got this challenge. They've looked at the tech, they've realized it does work for certain things in the business, and they're now sort of getting a lot more serious. They're going into build phase, and they might be building AI agents, but I think in some of our larger companies, I think are really building foundational models as well. I think that's going on, or quite significant AI systems. So the question for those executives and leaders in the business is really, what do we invest in? Which use cases do we pick up? So those are the people that I think we're trying to inform here. Is anyone who's looking at making a significant investment in AI? And I should say, I think this happens in SMEs and small companies right through the big end of town. And in actual fact, the decision theory, although it looks onerous and complex, the same sort of things come into play when you're making micro level decisions about AI investment versus the macro ones. So I started looking at how this is done and the investment frameworks that are used. So what I learned is from two studies that from researchers at the Queensland University of Technology wrote a book on why data science projects fail, and another one by Rand Corporation in America. They're like a large defense sector consulting company. They both looked at AI projects adoption and use, and they both found 80% failure rates, which is crazy high. ICT projects also have high failure rates, but not that high. They're closer to about a third because of the complexity, the unknowns. So yeah, I got into, well, what's causing this? And the number, there's a bunch of reasons, things about data and business integration, but the number one, at least in the Rand report, was choosing the wrong projects in the first place. You did something with AI that didn't matter, that wasn't well placed. AI wasn't really going to solve it, and you put a lot of effort into doing this when should have been something else. And some of the AI teams I work with in companies have this same dilemma in that they are they create an AI team, they have a set of legacy projects, and then they're saying, hey, these actually aren't the ones we need to be doing. So this problem of choosing the right ones was significant. Then the expenditure reaching globally, we're spending around $400 billion Australian a year on AI projects. Some estimates put that going up to $1 trillion by 2028. So we're about to spend a lot. And with an 80% failure rate for Australia, this matters a lot, is what I found. So then I think that's a basis for looking at more rigor in ex-ante evaluation. Now, I'd draw an analogy to infrastructure, as we did in our work on foundation models here, in that building tunnels, bridges, railways, these things is really, it's been through a journey as well, where we've learned that we don't get great return on investment, that we struggle to choose the best infrastructure options, and it's always quite controversial. And that's why we've seen these agencies and Treasury build methodology and process around doing this better. And I think that's where we're at in the AI journey, and this paper goes into what those methodologies might be.
Saying is that like some of these methodological techniques that have been developed over the years are less, if you like, risk averse but covering, and actually an attempt to really understand what's the right and best intervention in a complex system. Is that one way to think about it?
I think that's a good way and an advanced way to think about it, if we can get to, is looking at the system. So if you look at a city with all its infrastructure, and I did get involved in working on infrastructure and benefit cost analysis, but often we found a small project placed within the context of a system, like just plugging a gap in the pedestrian network, a small bridge or a little road crossing or something, allowed traffic to move, and it was great dollars return on investment. You spend a small amount, but that's because you viewed the infrastructure insertion in the context of the whole system. AI, I think, is like that. An AI model never does its magic on its own. We don't just turn it on and get a better business process. It's got to be integrated into the hospital or the real estate company or the whatever. That's actually part of one of the bits. So comprehending the system that it's getting dropped into is definitely part of it. And I'd say, you can look at Infrastructure Australia, and they have guides and processes around benefit cost analysis and multi-criteria analysis and stakeholder consultation to do this better. And, they're on a journey too. But I think what strikes me as interesting is how the ICT and now AI sectors haven't really picked up this thinking as much to get rigor in investment analysis and return on investment.
Yeah, okay, cool. So, and before we move on to the ex-ante guide, one other question, which is a really mean one. What is an AI project?
That is tough, and I've struggled with that as we got the internal review. Then it's a fair. So it turns out, it's a lot of different things. An AI project could be buying licenses to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or one of these tools for your staff. That's something that is a valid thing to do and can already increase productivity. But an AI project might also be hundreds of millions of dollars going into getting data, building compute, training, doing unsupervised machine learning to train that model to do something like the weather forecasting system that Google DeepMind created. That's at the higher end, but that is a valid AI project as well. Like in the banking system, banks, I think, will be creating AI foundation models based on all their data to be able to do loan approvals, to speed up all sorts of transactions, to detect fraud. So they're sort of at the making. And so I'd say we have the case of the software tools and getting access to them. We have AI agents, which aren't actually models and in and of themselves. They are software tools that use AI models to get information, to sense that information, and then to perform some sort of task with autonomy according to the rules they're given. The AI agent will typically be using something like a ChatGPT via its API or something like that. And then we have AI models with supervised machine learning or unsupervised machine learning, where you actually start to use a data set. So you might have for example, a radiologist out of a hospital approached me and they had a data set of breast scans because they could use it to diagnose breast cancer earlier. And that's building a model and training it on your data set for a specific task. And then we sort of get to the larger end of town, which is AI foundation models. And, the very top end, these are sort of we're gonna see like training runs of the really top performing global models exceed $150 billion. It's a training run only. So it is a bit of a how long is a piece of string question about how much you spend on AI. I think the costs of AI agent development is going to come down, and the cost of making models is going to come down. But the thing is that the race at the top end of town is to build better and better models that move towards this thing called artificial general intelligence. Look, the same frameworks that we use to make investment decisions anywhere or to prioritize out of the fields of decision theory and economics fully apply in AI. But I guess the main difference is, to my mind, AI is like an R&D project. It has a lot of uncertainty, and that's why we get such high failure rates. You don't know what's going to happen with data when you sit out. So the tools are return on investment analysis, ROI. Now, anyone working in a company will know this. This is about looking at the cash flow, the costs and the revenues, and trying to determine whether the thing you're investing in is profitable. And that's a very standard thing done on any investment. We can do ROI on some AI projects, and I think it's important to do that where you can to get a sense of it. But the challenges are not all is in monetary units, and cause and effect isn't really well known yet. You don't know at the beginning exactly what the benefit categories are going to be or the cost categories are fully going to be. But I think where possible, I think there is value in starting to do traditional ROI more on AI projects. From ROI, I'd go to benefit cost analysis, which is more about it's usually seen as more of a public sector thing, because this is where the interest rates go down. So a much higher interest rate is used in ROI because it's about return on investment for a company. But in benefit cost analysis, we typically have a lower one, and we're looking at societal benefits and costs. So this might be a case like the radiographer developing a model to look at scans to diagnose cancer in advance. That would be there's social benefit there. And if it was something that the government was investing in, you'd look at, again, the benefits in dollars over time, the costs in dollars over time, and turn it into a net present value or a benefit cost ratio. And that's what pushes you towards techniques like cost utility analysis or cost effectiveness analysis. Cost effectiveness analysis, there's one output that we're seeking to invest in, and cost utility is we build a utility metric which captures all the benefits possible, and these are used to rank and score. And then multi-criteria analysis is the framework where we have a set of criteria. The criteria can be weighted, and then the AI projects can be plugged in and ranked. Now, one of the companies I work with call this a weighted scorecard. It's the same thing. They just have use cases to do this in this part of the business, another HR application, another one on logistics, supply chains. So they've got all their use cases, and then they have their criteria. And the criteria could be return on investment. ROI could be one of the criteria that is housed within the MCA. But then they're saying there's other things about technical feasibility. Does it make our customers happier? Is the data there? Is it ethically safe? So we have built frameworks that use that flexible MCA approach.
And presumably you could compare an AI solution to a problem compared to a non-AI solution through that framework.
I think you could. I think you could. And I think that's a really valid thing to do, because, what is often missed in a rush to implement an AI project is the value of not doing it, or doing it a conventional way, because in some cases that's going to be a better option. So it can do that, and I think it allows you. It gives you transparency, analytic rigor. It puts data into the decision making, so it's not just people making judgments and gut feels solely. It's auditable, and you can say, and even if things don't work out, you can say, well, this was the basis. We had these criteria, they were weighted like this, and this is how things were ranked and scored. So I think a lot of the problems I look at AI investment are more in that case. And an MCA model can be a simple back of envelope thing done on a whiteboard, or it can be an advanced computer model that you put a lot of effort into, depending on what you're at. I think certainly, though, benefit cost analysis and ROI are great. They can be brought within the space of an MCA, but I think in some cases you struggle to do a complete assessment of all the costs and benefits in dollar terms, but critically determine cause and effect. And it's the same in CSIRO when we invest in R&D projects. Doing a benefit cost analysis on an R&D project, you have to make some really wild assumptions because of you don't know cause and effect at the early stages of an R&D project. So I think AI is a bit like that, and that's why we have that 80% failure rate, and that's why there's so much uncertainty. Yeah. So those are the main sort of established decision theoretic economic evaluation frameworks that help you work out how to spend money, and they are fully applicable in the space of AI and ICT. And I think there's a value in making more use of these frameworks to make smarter decisions, public and private.
Interesting. Okay. And so my next question is, like, that sounds like a complete set. Is there anything special about AI? Like, will these analytic tools fail in some cases, or do you need to invent a new analytic technique, anything like that?
Yeah. So everything sort of has its own special case. Yeah, there are some things about AI. I'd first point towards uncertainty and what is unknown. Okay, so 2 years ago when we were starting that work on AI foundation models, some companies made quite big investments in building AI models. And I know of one of them where it didn't work because of upgrades to the main commercial models like ChatGPT. Basically, the upgrades to that made the one they were building non-useful anymore. And it just, why would you, in a year's time, it was like, why would you use this one that we've, even though we put a lot of dollars,
just stopped being relevant.
It was, there was nothing wrong with what they did other than the uncertainty about what would happen. And there's actually been a huge improvement in the main commercial AI foundation and the open access models over the last 2 years. They've gotten heaps better. So first one around AI that makes it different is this rapid pace of tech development, and we've got to kind of keep our view. The next 2 years is going to see this probably continue. There's a lot that can go on that will change the capability of the models. We might see new ones emerge in certain spaces, and it can sometimes be a bit of a winner takes all situation where the Google GenCast system, if it is it's winning on 97% of the benchmarks for weather forecasting within 15 days. Will that just obliterate a lot of the other weather forecasts? Because why would you wouldn't take a second best. So I think the technology change that surrounds it is one of those things. And that's where scenario planning or sensitivity analysis or some sort of qualitative risk assessment can I think be pretty valuable. The other bit is around portfolio. If you are moving into a higher risk space, same as looking at the share market, you apply modern portfolio theory. Now, again, it doesn't have to be totally complex. You can just do a little quadrant box of high risk, low risk, high risk, low return, high risk, high return. Those you want to be in the different spaces. Again, akin to how we think about project investment in CSIRO, you do some of the risky high return ones that may not pay off. Then you might do some of the low risk, lower return ones that are more likely to pay off. And you start with your lower hanging fruit typically, and you learn from them. So I think that portfolio approach is relevant. And then the other thing is what you said about systems. Systems are really critical here. It's business integration. That's the big challenge about getting value. I think we're going to see the cost of making an AI agent continue to fall. I can think of a health sector company that approached us and a pretty low cost, they could build an AI agent to read clinical notes and do interpretation of them. But I think the big challenge is business integration and actually testing it, making it work. And I think in a lot of spaces, we just got to see the costs come down and down of making these agents and making models, but the business integration challenge and how it fits into the system is going to be critical. So those are some of the things that are special about AI.
Yeah, and I think So in your report, you've got a whole bunch of, in addition to the quantitative analysis techniques, you've got a bunch of qualitative analysis techniques, which I think goes to this business about sort of understanding the context and balancing the risk.
Right.
And that systems piece, I think, is going to become critical because like this is, none of these things are born in isolation, right? And if you you think about what happened to, we've used transportation metaphors a lot, but if you think about what happened to the dominance of the railway system in the 19th century when people invented the internal combustion engine small enough to go into a private vehicle, like it just radically transformed the system.
Right.
When people invest in an AI project, they keep hoping that they're going to have one of those, but oftentimes not. So
that's right. There's huge complexity in making it work. But I mean, even though it's a challenging and daunting prospect, I think to not invest in AI is also a hugely risky prospect. Because if you go down that path, your competitor, and there's lots of cases of this, the competitor does it first. They go through the fails, but they find the 20% that work, and then it completely changes their business, and pretty quickly you're in trouble. So I think that's part of the equation here. Is there's no risk-free option when you look at AI in a business strategy sense.
And you've got to be really thoughtful about that choice as well.
The time is now to really start to build up our capability to make these sorts of decisions better.
All right, so we're going to start to wrap up. Give us one, possibly two things that, based on all of your expertise, you think people should be paying attention to over the next couple of years.
Yeah. All right. So already, I think if you're in a company, small or large, AI is likely to do something significant in your company. And if you're not doing it, your competitors are, and it's going to happen pretty quickly. It's daunting and tricky when you get into it, and expect quite a lot not to fail. However, what are you going to do Monday morning? I think you want to be just try this. Try starting to look at business problems first, things we'd like to solve in the business. Make a list of them. Then step 2, look at what AI can do to help. And in some cases, you might think, well, AI, if there's data, if it's a repeatable process, if there are rules and structure around it, and it's painful, there's a chance AI tools could do something. That's looking like a better one. So then you get your refined list of where AI can help. Then put a set of criteria about technical feasibility, about return on investment, and just build a table to sort of rank and prioritize what you might think could work. And this can be the starting point of your AI use cases that you can do. You can then roll them out and implement them, and expect a fair bit of change and churn as it goes on, and then you'll learn and get your next set happening as well. But that's typically the best way to approach the problem, is to look at the business problems and to do that ranking and scoring. So that's the case for most of it. If your organization is starting to has done that already, and you've gone through the learning phases, and like some of the banks have, and some other large government agencies are as well, I think they're moving into a phase where they're starting to say, all right, we're going to do some heavy lifting, and we're going to pick up some of the more really complex, challenging business problems. That's where you also, I think, want to get more serious about doing the analysis and the intelligence beforehand about which ones to invest in that matter most. And that's where you need those systems, including all of the human element and the qualitative. There isn't sort of a single formula that's going to answer it for you, but that's all part of it together. And that's the other bit that I'd say is start to look at it in terms of return on investment for the taxpayer, for Australia, or for your shareholders.
Cool. And just to bring us home, you are a technology foresight dude. So what's kind of scratching what itch are you trying to scratch right now? What's getting you excited about the future?
I mean, I think the next 2 to 3 years, there's phenomenal possibility. I got it all wrong when I wrote the roadmap in 2020 for Australia. We did not predict the world of 2025. And I've talked to other AI experts, and they were all like, in 2020, I'd have told you, no, it wasn't possible, what you're doing now. I find that interesting. I don't know you, Eleanor, but that was, I've talked to some people who are really in the field, and they were like, yeah, we didn't think this was possible. So what's the world of 2028? I think we actually have to create scenarios around whether we call it artificial superintelligence or general intelligence, but we are in a point now where we need to think about what that could potentially look like. But it's only a scenario; it's not a given.
Yep.
And I think that's part of it. So that's one of the things. But the other couple of things that's really getting me interested, I think, is it's still about humans and humans making choices and decisions.
Absolutely.
And I think this marriage of bringing decision theory into the space of AI about how this harmonization between human decision makers and AI happens, I think is really huge. I also think there is something around ensuring equality of opportunity in this world that we're creating. Let's go back to the Industrial Revolution and the cotton mills of Northern England. A lot of people did not see their quality of life improve for a long time in that period. We want this to be inclusive and for everyone, and I think figuring that out is part of the journey as well, that this works for all the geographies of Australia, all the demographics, and all. There's no one sort of left behind in this. I think that actually is something worth thinking about.